Speaker, today is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. There have been repeated calls from Alberta's Indigenous leaders for the Premier to support a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. The inquiry would investigate the disproportionate number of Indigenous women who are missing or murdered and provide recommendations to deal with the problem. To the Associate Minister of Aboriginal Relations, will you stand with Alberta's Indigenous leaders and support a national inquiry?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are focused on what we can do here in Alberta to deal with the plight of Aboriginal women, with poverty, with the matters that we referred to earlier in this House, poverty, the lack of educational opportunity, the lack of vocational advancement, educational outcomes, and as well addiction issues, Mr. Speaker. These are the matters that we can control within our province, that we can work in a collaborative way along with First Nations. That should be our focus, Mr. Speaker, and that is exactly what we are doing.
For a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's no reason you can't call for it, Mr. Premier. Given that the RCMP has stated that the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women is indicative of a much broader societal challenge, and given that a national inquiry would place recommendations for solutions to this issue, as well as allow Indigenous communities to tell their stories and perhaps find closure in the losses of their loved ones, to the Deputy Minister of Aboriginal Relations, how can you continue to say there is no value in supporting Indigenous communities across Canada in their call for an inquiry?
Premier, Minister of Aboriginal Relations.
No one has said any such thing, Mr. Speaker. Today represents an important step forward in terms of the Moose Hide campaign, the swatch which I wear. We should all personally take a stand against violence against Aboriginal women in our society. This is a problem in Alberta that we need to address. That's why we are supporting this grassroots campaign, something that we are doing in conjunction with the Friendship Centres, which began the campaign, Mr. Speaker. It's important that we all take stands individually and that men and women stand up against violence against Aboriginal women.
Final supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wearing a swatch is not enough. Given that this government has claimed to be committed to working with Indigenous groups and listening to their chiefs and leaders, and given that all 48 of Alberta's chiefs supported a motion that calls for a national inquiry, and all 48 have asked the Premier to reconsider his position, do you really believe that you know better than Alberta's First Nations leaders on First Nations issues?
Honourable Premier, Minister of Aboriginal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, no one would suggest that wearing a swatch is all that any one of us should do. And the honourable member should know, if he looks at my past history, working on these issues over the course of a lifetime, that I have beliefs about what needs to be done, Mr. Speaker. And so we will continue to work together. I am haunted, Mr. Speaker, always by a statistic that I learned when I was Canada's Aboriginal Affairs Minister, and that is that an Aboriginal woman, a First Nation woman who does not complete high school, will make less than $100,000 in her entire lifetime. That's what we need to address, Mr. Speaker. It's poverty, it's educational advancement for Aboriginal women.